Hey everyone, I got yet another video for you. I've been making quite a lot lately, just to kind of make up for the slower pace for the last few months. So today I just wanted to talk about kind of my general procedure when I buy an old gun, as well as maybe a couple things to look out for if you're in the market for an old gun. So I have this Chinese Mosin Nagant that was in my last video, or maybe a couple videos ago now. So the very first thing you want to check is bore condition. I'm not even going to try to get a good picture of the bore on this thing, but I mean, one really good thing to do is to just check the crown and see if there's any like just abnormalities on the crown, um, and then hold the gun up to the light, point it at the light, and you can't really see that on the camera. But if you can see the spiraling in there, and you examine it pretty closely, and on something like this, it just needs to be there. This isn't a bench rest gun. So number one is bore condition. Number two, I like to look over the finish. This finish is actually in relatively good shape. It's not a nice finish by any means, but it's there. A lot of my other guns, it's really pretty worn, which is unfortunate. And that's something, sometimes you can talk people down, like, oh, is the original finish still there or not? And that's kind of boosts the collector value if it is. Another big one is the actual, are the numbers all matching? So you can see the bolt serial number is whatever that is. And it does not match the serial number on the action. So this is not a matching gun. So that drives down the value a little bit. I also like to see, are there any missing parts? Guns with slings don't typically go for anymore, but if I had two identical guns and one had a sling over the other, I would take that just because I think slings are really nice and they can be a headache to get your hands on otherwise. Bayonets are also something I would definitely pay at least another like $40 to $50 for if the rifle has one. So that's everything that I check for really when I'm buying it. And then once I get it home, there's a few things that I need to do. The rifle's at my house. It's moved from the gun store rack to my workbench. Very first thing I typically do is I fully disassemble the gun. Take all the wood off, take the bolt out, disassemble the bolt. I clean up the bolt, check the firing pin and firing pin spring, replace or repair those if they need to be. And then I just get all of the gunk off. Some of these guns are 50 years old, some of them are 75 years old, some of them are well north of 100 years old. And you just want to make sure that while this thing is sitting in your safe, it's not still rotting away because there's junk inside that didn't get cleaned at the store. So this one, I cleaned this gun like a year ago before it was even mine, so I know it's in good shape. Another thing I like to do is I like to clean up butt plates. I think I talked about this a little bit, but it's a really, really simple thing to do. You don't need to go crazy with the polishing, but just to get the rust off, and it just cleans up the look of the gun. It makes it look like it's been taken care of. And while I'm doing that, I will also oftentimes throw a coat of linseed oil on the stock. That still needs to be done on this, so I'm going to do the butt plate and the stock, and I'll show you guys those. Okay, so for doing the stock, you'll need two things. One, rubber gloves, and two, some boiled linseed oil. This is pretty easy to find. I got mine at Home Depot. And then I already did this off camera because I was recording and I got interrupted. But you just pour some into your hand, small amount, and then just rub it in pretty thoroughly. You can also do this with bare hands, but like this stuff is, it's kind of a little bit gross, even as far as oils go. Like I'm okay getting most kinds of oil on my hand, but linseed oil is just, I don't really know. It's just kind of weird. So I just like to rub it in, and then obviously you want to get a hand guard here. I'll get a tiny bit more on my hand. literally you can't even like see it in my hand. For the handguard or top wood or whatever you want to call it, the forearm. And I let it sit for just a minute. And you can see this is really very glossy. It actually looks halfway decent on camera despite being Chinese Mosin-Nagant wood. And then take your gloves off. And I like to get the inletting especially, if I can, because so like the inside of the stock that gets cut out for where the action and the barrel and everything go, because those a lot of the times those areas don't get finished, and those are much more susceptible to rot because if moisture gets in there and then your average cleaning, you don't take the gun apart and clean in there, and then it's also not finished. That's kind of a recipe to start decaying some wood. So now, get some paper towels. And I will just rub this off. And so even though you don't need to go crazy really, you just are getting the excess off. So all that junk. And so there's still going to be a decent amount left on here. And you're just going to want to let the wood sit for usually at least like an hour to really soak it in. Typically, I just let my stuff sit either throughout the evening. This is like late afternoon. I'll go have dinner, do whatever, come back and put the gun back together. You just want to give the wood time to kind of just soak it in, just like a tree would with water in the rain. And generally you don't want it touching anything, obviously. That's pretty straightforward. And another thing to note is this really only works with oiled wood finishes. So like a polyurethane finish, where you actually have the wood sealed inside of like a resin, like say on my Virao stock, that blue laminate. This doesn't work on that because the wood is completely sealed off from the environment. So just know what kind of finish is on your stock. I'm fairly certain like every old military surplus bolt-action rifle should be an oiled-in finish. So now, while that's curing, we're going to tackle this guy. And I'm also going to show you guys my polishing setup real quick. So there's a variety of ways that you can go about polishing something like this. It's a very simple manner. Firstly, I like safety glasses whenever I'm working with power tools. I almost lost my eye a couple months ago, so I've been really good about that. But I'll go through some of the different methods. So first off is just sanding blocks. I have like 100 grit, like 180 grit, and then 220 grit or something. So that's not super high, but they're pretty convenient. They're pretty comfortable in the hand. Then I also have sandpaper and wet dry sandpaper. Again, by hand. I have wet dry that goes up to like 3,000 grit, and that is way overkill for this project. But I'm actually not going to be doing this by hand tonight. I'm going to be using buffing compounds on my Dremel. And you can also use buffing compounds on a bench grinder as well. I only have one buffing wheel for the bench grinder, and yeah, I have enough for the Dremel. So okay, so I've got some buffing compound on the polishing wheel, which all you really need to do for that is, and it'll cook right on. I've read some books where like you've got to like bake them in the oven for a half an hour, and it's like, no, you don't need to do that. Just spin it in there. And then I'll just bring the RPMs up just a little under 2,000. Yeah, so I'm not going to do it all on camera just because I want to focus on it. But this is essentially how it goes. Again, I don't normally use the vise. That's just because I'm one-handed right now. But so I'll probably just do the first two compounds for now. Because I mean it's a Moses and a Gaunt. This doesn't need to be a mirror finish. So yeah, that's all there really is to it. And then after each kind of layer or round, I just scratch it all off with some fine that's quadruple aught steel wool, and then I just clean it off with some lacquer thinner, so that I can get all the excess material out, so that I don't still have the coarser grit compound on there when I go up to the finer grit. And I'll show you guys the finished product. So we've got this all cleaned up, and you can see obviously there's still a lot of those deeper pitting and scratches left, which I actually wanted to leave. This stuff doesn't get too coarse. If I really wanted to, I could have gone down to like 80 grit sandpaper and really dug into it. But I wanted it to still match the condition of the rifle and just not be rusted out, and look halfway decent. So I think it'll still look really good and really authentic, not like, oh, one piece got restored to brand new while the rest of the gun is still 75 years old. One thing that I did kind of mess up on is you can see I washed out just a little bit of the serial number, which really isn't a huge deal. Um, it's really hard to polish up around a serial number or a marking or something, especially if that part has rust on it, because you need to skip over it with the coarser stuff and then really lay into it with the finer stuff that can't um, wash out your markings and your stampings. So that's something I'm still learning. But I think this came out relatively well. There's no rust on it anymore. The inside is meh. Um, and yeah, so that's all for today. And I'll see you guys soon.